Oh, welcome again. I guess it's season 1, episode 3 of the single point part of the 9 teams in 9 weeks, and of course of all interviews in regarding to the CFL podcast known as Rouge Radio. My name is Rob Dalton, and joining me is always, well, notwithstanding the last couple of weeks, Tony Allen. And this week, as part of the 9 teams in 9 weeks, we are previewing the British Columbia Lions, and for that we go to the West Coast, as some people know it as the Best Coast. Mr. Brian Wawryshyn from the BC Lions podcast. Brian, thanks for coming on.
Hey, no problem, guys. Thanks for having me.
A little unknown fact: we are the virgin call of the Brian's little new new podcast studio that he's getting prepared for the season. So nothing like being the first in the brand spanking new studio. Is it fully furnished? Is it all ready to go?
The only thing that's not ready to go is the pictures and stuff on the walls. But I've been spending the off season painting and clearing and decluttering and going to the dump and Value Village and taking a bunch of stuff there. It's been a busy off season, but it's finally done, and just got to do the decorating now. So I'm pretty excited about it, and I don't have to take my gear apart every week now to make room for the wife to exercise in here. I've taken over the room, so it's my little den now. So it's perfect, and I'm really looking forward to this season.
So Andrew of the Eskimo Empire podcast calls his the Turf District. Do you have a name set up for yours yet?
No, just the den. Lions Den.
Just the Lions Den. Makes sense. Makes sense.
Kind of suits the podcast name and everything else, so it's awesome. A den.
Hey, let's get to the theme at hand here with the BC Lions. I saw your tweet the other day, and you didn't really care that much for the draft, considering the Lions didn't get a pick until the third round. Having said that, how do you think that Ed Hervey and the BC Lions did at this past week's draft?
Well, I think they were looking to add depth, right? When they're picking at that spot, you're probably not going to get one of the top prospects in the draft. And, I know they feel that they got their guy, and every team will say that they got their guy. But, I think when, Noah Robinson came up in the third round, he's the guy that they said they liked. And, so they got him. And I think the rest of the signings were more depth signings. One interesting signing was defensive back Hakeem Johnson, who's the brother of Shaq Johnson here, so that's kind of an interesting addition. Jonathan Harkey, is it Harkey or Hark? I'm not even sure. He was the one that showed the best on the bench press of the draft, so you got some strength there. But Ed Hervey is looking for taller, bigger, faster players, and I think he's addressed that not only in this draft but in the offseason as well. So, I don't know a lot of these guys. I can't really give you an opinion on what type of players they are. I haven't seen them play, and, half of them might not even make it through training camp. So, I don't really pay too much attention to the draft unless the Lions are, picking in the first 5 picks or so, and, maybe in the second round as well. But, I think he did what he wanted to do, and that was add some depth in the Canadian spots.
Hey, Brian, it's Tony. How's it going?
Hey, good, Tony. How are you?
Pretty good. I think it's about a year since we've chatted, so hopefully everything's all right. You were just talking about the draft, and Dalts alluding to the fact that you didn't seem that interested, but let's be honest, we all know the only day that really had BC fans glued to their TVs and or internets was free agent frenzy, and maybe take me through what it was like to be a BC Lions fan and just watching your ticker explode.
Oh, it was exciting. I mean, last year on the podcast, there was all these rumors about Mike Riley and Mike Riley this, Mike Riley that. I was on record as saying I didn't think it was going to happen. I thought he was going to stay in Edmonton. I thought he was, pretty happy there, embedded in the community there. I thought the Eskimos would move mountains to bring him in, and they did make him a very comparable contract offer. But I guess family and location kind of, made his decision for him. That was a really exciting signing, and I know the Lions, talking to people in the Lions ticket office, they say the phones were exploding the week following free agency. So, they added some nice additions. You look at the offense and Duron Carter and Lamar Durant coming in from Calgary, that's added some receivers depth to the receiving core. On defense, Ed's bringing in some more of his guys with Aaron Grimes and guys like that. So, I think that, there was a lot of reason to be excited as a Lions fan. The shift has kind of gone from the defense to the offense. They've kind of loaded up there. Another guy that I'm excited about is John White. If he can stay healthy, I think that could be the steal of free agency. He's a very solid running back, and if he gets the ball enough, I think, and can stay healthy, which he's had a problem doing, I think that's going to be a great signing. So, it's a very exciting time to be a BC Lions fan, but of course, as we saw this week, it comes with a price as well.
Yeah, so maybe I'm asking a very loaded, heavy question here, but considering we just talked about how big free agent frenzy was, just knee-jerk reaction, initial reactions, could we be looking at maybe one of the best BC Lions teams we've ever seen developing for this season? And let's go best case scenario. Let's say it goes the way we expect it to, because that's more fun than just always being safe or negative. But could we potentially be looking at maybe one of the best BC Lions teams to ever play a regular season?
Well, there's been some pretty good Lions teams in the past, and I don't want to put that label on it right now. I think there's been a lot of turnover. I think the Lions might start a little slow as this team gels. I think I read the other day there's something like 27 players on this roster that have never played for the BC Lions before. So, there's been a lot of turnover, not only player personnel-wise, but on the coaching staff as well. So, you got a rookie head coach coming in who's going to be learning as he goes. Not much experience on that coaching staff with the exception of Rich Stubler. So, I think it could be, and I would look probably to the second year of this Mike Riley addition to see the Lions really take off when they can add a few more pieces and some of these guys develop into the system. I think it's asking a bit much to consider this team as one of the great Lion teams of all time at this point, but it's certainly very exciting, and I think a new direction was needed here, and we certainly have that right now.
You won't find bigger Mike Riley fans outside of BC or Edmonton, obviously, than myself and Tony. We will never, ever stop raving about Mike Riley. Having said that, obviously the SMS going up this year, or potentially, although that has yet to be confirmed, 700,000 plus, a little bit too much for a 34 going on 35-year-old quarterback that's probably has a history of taking a lot of bumps in the past years.
He's got a history of taking a lot of bumps, but he also has a history of being very durable. I mean, he hasn't missed that many games, with the exception of the knee injury, I think, a few years ago. I can't remember what year it was off the top of my head, but he's been a very durable guy. And, if he'd had knee injuries and concussions and things like that, then I'd probably be a little bit concerned. But at the same time, CFL contracts aren't guaranteed. Maybe that changes with the CBA. I doubt it. But you need to get a big name in this city, and something had to excite the fans here, and I think Ed's gone out and done that with the addition of Mike Riley. 34 years old, is it old? I don't know. Henry Burris won a Grey Cup. Was he 40 at the time? So I think that Mike's got a few good years left in him, and I think that's the plan here, is to get those few good years out of him, develop the next guy, and reignite the football fan base here. I think it was money well spent, even though it has hampered the team in keeping some other players, and I'm sure we're going to get to that in a sec. But I think it's a move that had to be made, in my opinion, and I think it's the right move. His durability speaks for itself. Now, that being said, if he goes down, there's not much behind him. So, knock on wood that Mike can stay healthy this season.
I to be honest with you, and knock on wood, and I'm doing it right now, that is, should he be injured, there's not a lot of options behind Mike Riley, but that's par for the course across the league. You're probably not going to notice a lot of people that are able to step in and perform what the starters are able to do. Let's focus back to free agency, because there's a big name receiver that you guys signed in the name of Jerron Carter. Now, he brings a lot of flash on the field, and is there any worry about the stuff and unwanted attention that he brings off the field?
Well, there is. I'm not going to lie. Obviously there's been some issues with every team he's been with. The one thing that kind of gives me some comfort is Mike Riley being in that dressing room, because I don't think Jerron Carter is going to be able to disrupt that room. Mike Riley is a pro, and he will grab you by the throat, throw you up against the wall if you're not falling into line. So I think there's enough leadership in that room that they can control that. I think Ed Hervey's the type of GM, and Devon Claybrooks is the type of coach who is going to give Carter a little bit of rope to be himself, to express himself. And we've seen certainly on Twitter the last few weeks. His comments regarding the CBA and getting into it with Rider fans and all this kind of stuff. Duran is going to be Duran, and I think maybe some of the issues he's had in the past are people trying to control Duran, and maybe that's the wrong approach to take. Maybe you let him be himself. Maybe you let him be flamboyant and charismatic and do all the things he loves to do out there. I know Mike Riley has talked to him multiple times this off season, and he's really looking forward to working with him. He's looking forward to working with Mike Riley. So. And he's got to realize too that he's running out of chances. Now, maybe he's not that serious football, and maybe he doesn't care if he's running out of chances. But when you look at how he's bounced around this league, there can't be too many more opportunities for Ron Carter, which is a shame because he's a really talented player. So, the Lions haven't had a really deep threat receiver for quite a while now. Brian Burnham's more of a over the middle tough catch kind of receiver. He doesn't burn you deep that much. So I think it's a great addition if he can stay on course. But I think Mike Riley's going to help him do that.
Let's go back because you had mentioned a new coaching staff. Devon Claybrooks coming over from Calgary as their defensive coordinator. You mentioned that you're probably not going to see, maybe you'll see a little bit more, a huge improvement to what their potential is in the year two. But what is the one thing that kind of got you, I don't want to say giddy like a schoolgirl, but what was the one thing that got you really more passionate about this team when the news broke out that Devon Claybrooks was going to be the new head coach in BC?
Right when we had him on the podcast. I mean, I was so impressed with the way he was able to talk to us and be open with us about things. And I just think it's a whole new breath of fresh air breathed into this organization. It's a young vibe. I mean, you look at the coaching staff: Claybrooks, Phillips, Brian Chew, Keith Stokes, Drew Tate, Nick Lewis, and then you throw Rich Dubler in there that increase the average age a little bit. But I think that it's a young, energetic coaching staff, and they're ready to go and take this team I'm not sure how Devon Claybrooks is going to do as a head coach. Obviously, he's been a great defensive coordinator in Calgary. He's learned under Dave Dickinson for a few years, so that can't hurt. But obviously, this team is going to have its own identity, and they're going to, they're going to march to Claybrooks' drum. And when he came here, he said that he didn't want to fill Wally's shoes; he wanted to walk in his own shoes, and I think he's going to do that. I think it's going to be a breath of fresh air for this organization, which spent a lot of years under the Wally Buono era, and it's younger, it's fresher, it's going to be more upbeat, and I think we're going to see some exciting football out of them for sure.
One of the things that happened through free agency, obviously you spend all that money, you're going to have to cut it. Wally Buono had a tendency in years past to cut a guy probably a year or two before their best before date happened. He had that had that tendency. This year they bid adieu to mainstays on that roster for a lot of a huge, I think a bait dating back to 2010, and of course I'm referring to Manny Arsenault and Solomon Elimimian. How are the BC fans they're pretty much, obviously you've got your fair weather fan that they know the names that have been wearing the BC colors. How are those fans handling the fact that two guys who have actually probably owned their jerseys are no longer going to be on their roster starting this year?
Well, welcome to being a CFL fan, right? It's tough, right? It's always tough to see popular players go, and I think anybody who follows sports and watches sports a lot realizes that this day comes for every player. And I didn't think Manny Arsenault was going to be back this year. In fact, I knew he wasn't going to be back. I didn't think Solomon was going to be back, based on some things that people had told me during last season. I didn't think he would be back, especially if they went after Mike Riley, which they did. So something had to give. And, a lot of the fans are buying into this Ed Hervey is shady stuff. And, they did Solomon dirty and all this kind of stuff. Well, the bottom line is Solomon Elimimian was under contract, and he was an asset to the BC Lions. I truly believe Ed when he says he was trying to find a way to make it work to keep Solomon here. I don't think that he was able to do that under the cap. I think at that point he tried to initiate a trade for him to try and get something back for that asset. When that didn't work, then they released him. This wasn't a situation where the guy was going to be a free agent and they told him, we're not going to sign you. You can talk to anybody you want prior to free agency. We don't care. He was an asset to the BC Lions, and Ed Hervey has an obligation to his team, to his fans, to try and get something for that asset. And I think that's what he was trying to do. It didn't work. And, his agent can speak all he wants about Ed Hervey being shady, but as a fan, as somebody who follows the BC Lions, who's passionate about them, I want my GM to do his job and to try and get something for that asset. It didn't work out. Solomon's released, and so be it. Some of the fans are saying they're not going to go to games anymore. They're not going to do this. They're not going to do that. That's silly, man. Do you cheer for the team? Do you cheer for the name on the front of the jersey, or do you cheer for the name on the back of the jersey, right? You've heard that saying a million times. So, to me, it's unfortunate. I thank Solomon for everything he did. He was great in the community here. Obviously, a tremendous talent on the football field. But, this time comes for every player. And, the good GMs, the Wally Bonos, the John Huffnagels, these are guys that see this coming in the future, and they react before it starts affecting their club. And the salary cap obviously forced the Lions' hand a little bit here, but I wish him nothing but the best. And if fans don't want to stay away, they're going to miss some. If fans do want to stay away because of that, then they're going to miss some exciting football.
Speaking of fans, I was just going to ask you about the record, but then you pointed that up here. The addition of Mike Riley has sparked season ticket sales. Is that correct?
Yeah. Right after the Lions signed Mike Riley, there was a big spike in sales. Rick Lalisheur says that season tickets are up, renewal rates are up, and it sounds like not only are seat sales up, but the club seating at BC Place are selling really well as well. So, I think we're going to see some decent crowds this year at BC Place. I think a lot of people are intrigued by the change. I think a lot of people have considered the Lions a stale organization and, decided to stay away. I think that's changing. And, like I said, it may take a while. The Lions may come out of the gate a little slow. We'll see how it goes. But if it starts to be an aerial attack with Mike Riley throwing bombs to guys like Carter and Durant and Brian Burnham, I think it's going to be really exciting for football, and I think the fans will come back.
I cannot wait to see that, because my lone time that I went to BC Place, which was a decade ago, it is a loud environment, and it doesn't look like it. It probably doesn't come off on TV as it, but it is a very passionate environment in BC Place, and I wish nothing but the best for that organization, and hoping that it definitely improves. We're here with Brian Wawryshyn of the BC Lions podcast. Brian, before we let you go, your predictions. Where do you think the BC Lions will finish this year in the Western Division in 2019?
Wow, you guys ask me this every year, and every year I just kind of don't have an answer. Like, this year there's been so much turnover, right? Like, you add Mike Riley and you add some great receivers, but there's been some departures on the defense. There's been some additions on the defense that I think are going to take some time to gel. Everybody talks about Mike Riley leaving Edmonton, but I think the Edmonton Eskimos did some really great work in free agency. They got a great quarterback in Trevor Harris. Maybe not of the caliber of Mike Riley, but I think they replaced him with the best guy they could. They've added some great pieces on their defense. Calgary is always going to be there. Winnipeg has a strong club as well. I think that the Lions will be battling it out for anywhere from second to fourth in the division. I see the Riders finishing last because basically they don't have a quarterback as far as I'm concerned, and I don't see him staying healthy for the year. So I can't put them in last place, but I can't put them in first, and just because of the slow start I'm anticipating because of all the changes. So if you want a hard prediction, I'll say third.
Awesome.
Third.
We were kind of hoping that you went the Ryan route and picked 18-0, but that we definitely appreciate.
There's only
that.
one Ryan. there's only one Ryan Valentine. I mean, come on. It would just be imitation.
Exactly. Well, Brian, thanks for coming on the podcast, and we'll wish you luck on the podcast. Thanks for letting us be the first podcast recording in the new BC Lions Den podcast. Brian, thanks again for coming on.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. And hopefully our shows will be starting up again this week.